I thought the worst part of planning my wedding would be choosing between ivory and champagne for the flowers. I never imagined I'd be standing in my backyard at midnight, staring at the charred remains of my grandmother's vintage wedding dress, while my future mother-in-law slept peacefully upstairs, believing she'd successfully destroyed my special day. What she didn't know was that every second of her vindictive act was captured in crystal-clear 4K video. And my sister Jessica happened to be one of the most ruthless family law attorneys in the state. Some people learn the hard way that underestimating a bride 3 weeks before her wedding is a mistake that can cost them everything. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The morning everything began to unravel like any other Tuesday in my life as a soon-to-be bride. I was sitting at the kitchen island of the home I shared with my fiancé, David Mitchell, in the suburbs of Riverside, California, surrounded by wedding planning materials that had consumed every spare surface of our lives for the past 8 months. Sample invitations, fabric swatches, vendor contracts, and seating charts created an organized chaos that somehow made perfect sense to me, even if it drove David slightly crazy. At 28, I had built a successful career as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup downtown, work that had taught me the importance of detailed planning and systematic organization. These skills had proven invaluable in orchestrating what was shaping up to be the wedding of my dreams, scheduled for just 3 weeks away on a perfect Saturday in late September. The house we shared was a charming 1920s craftsman that David had purchased 2 years earlier, featuring original hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, and a spacious backyard that would host our engagement party the following weekend. Every room reflected our combined tastes and shared vision for our future together, from the vintage Persian rugs we'd found at estate sales to the modern art pieces that David's architectural eye had selected for the walls. David worked as a project manager for a residential construction company, a career that perfectly complemented his natural attention to detail and problem-solving abilities. His work often required early morning site visits and occasional weekend inspections, but he had been incredibly supportive throughout the wedding planning process, handling vendor communications and logistics with the same precision he brought to managing million-dollar construction projects. Our relationship had developed over 3 years of what felt like effortless compatibility. We shared similar values about family, career ambitions, and the kind of life we wanted to build together. David was thoughtful, reliable, and possessed a dry sense of humor that could make me laugh even during the most stressful moments of wedding planning. His proposal, 18 months earlier, had been perfectly orchestrated, taking place during a weekend trip to Napa Valley at the exact vineyard where we'd had our first overnight getaway as a couple. The one challenge in our otherwise harmonious relationship was David's mother, Eleanor Mitchell, a 62-year-old retired high school principal who had very definite opinions about how things should be done and wasn't shy about sharing them. Eleanor lived alone in a large Victorian house about 20 minutes away, having been widowed 5 years earlier when David's father passed away from a sudden heart attack. David was Eleanor's only child, and she had devoted herself completely to his success and happiness throughout his life. While I appreciated her dedication to her son, Eleanor's involvement in our wedding planning had become increasingly intrusive and controlling over the past several months. She questioned every decision, from the venue selection to the menu choices, always prefacing her criticisms with phrases like, "I'm only thinking of what's best for David," or, "I just want everything to be perfect for my son." The tension with Eleanor had reached new heights 3 weeks earlier, when I announced my decision to wear my grandmother's vintage wedding dress instead of purchasing a new gown. The dress was a stunning 1950s creation in ivory silk with delicate lace appliques and seed pearl detailing that had been preserved in perfect condition by my mother for over 40 years. My grandmother had worn it when she married my grandfather in 1953, and my mother had honored the tradition by wearing it at her own wedding in 1981. When I showed Eleanor the dress during a family dinner, her reaction was immediate and harsh. She declared the vintage gown completely inappropriate for a modern wedding and insisted that I should purchase something more suitable for the Mitchell family standards. Her criticism felt particularly personal because she knew how much the dress meant to me and how excited I was to continue the family tradition. Eleanor had spent the following weeks making increasingly pointed comments about my dress choice, suggesting that David deserved a bride who would make an effort to look proper, and hinting that my decision reflected poorly on my commitment to joining their family. David had defended my choice when he was present for these conversations, but Eleanor was careful to make many of her most cutting remarks when we were alone. The morning that would change everything began with what seemed like a gesture of reconciliation from Eleanor. She had called the previous evening to ask if she could spend the night at our house, explaining that she had an early morning appointment with her cardiologist and our location would save her a long drive across town. David and I had agreed immediately, both hoping that having Eleanor stay over might provide an opportunity for us to rebuild our relationship before the wedding. Eleanor had arrived around 6 o'clock the previous evening, carrying an overnight bag and a bottle of expensive wine that she presented as a peace offering. During dinner, she had been unusually pleasant and complimentary, praising my cooking and asking thoughtful questions about the final wedding preparations. She even mentioned how beautiful my grandmother's dress would look and apologized for her previous comments, claiming that she had been stressed about losing her son and hadn't expressed herself properly. David and I had exchanged relieved glances. Throughout the evening, both grateful that Eleanor seemed to be making an effort to support our wedding and accept me as part of the family. We spent the evening watching movies together, sharing wedding photos on my laptop, and discussing details about the ceremony and reception that Eleanor had previously criticized, but now seemed genuinely interested in supporting. Eleanor had retired to the guest bedroom around 10 o'clock, claiming she wanted to get a good night's sleep before her medical appointment. David and I had stayed up another hour, both commenting on how much better the evening had gone than we'd expected, and expressing hope that Eleanor's change in attitude would continue through the wedding and beyond. The guest room where Eleanor was staying was located at the back of the house, with windows overlooking our backyard and the detached garage where I stored wedding supplies and seasonal decorations. The room was comfortably furnished with a queen-size bed, antique dresser, and reading chair that David's grandmother had left him when she passed away several years earlier. My grandmother's wedding dress hung in a special garment bag in my bedroom closet, where it had remained safely stored since my final fitting the previous week. The dress fit me perfectly, with only minor alterations needed to adjust the hem length and take in the waist slightly. My mother had insisted on having the dress professionally cleaned and pressed before the wedding, and it was scheduled to be picked up by the preservation specialist the following Thursday. The morning routine that would lead to my discovery began at 6:30, when David's alarm went off for an early site inspection at a residential development project in Orange County. He moved quietly through the house, gathering his work clothes and project files while trying not to wake Eleanor or disturb my sleep. David's consideration for others was one of the qualities I loved most about him, and he took pride in being thoughtful about the small details that made living together harmonious and comfortable. I stirred briefly when David kissed me goodbye, around 7:15, mumbling something about working late to finish project reports and planning to be home by 6 o'clock for dinner. Eleanor's medical appointment was scheduled for 9 o'clock, and she had mentioned the previous evening that she would probably leave shortly after 8 to allow time for traffic and parking at the medical complex. My own work schedule was flexible. That day, with most of my responsibilities involving email communications and project updates that could be handled remotely, I had planned to spend the morning finalizing RSVPs for the wedding reception and confirming details with our photographer about timeline and location requirements for the ceremony coverage. The house felt peaceful and quiet as I made coffee and settled into my morning routine of checking emails and reviewing the wedding planning checklist that had become my daily ritual. Eleanor seemed to be sleeping late, which I attributed to her desire to rest before what she had described as an important cardiac follow-up appointment that would include several tests and consultations. Around 8:30, I heard sounds of movement from the guest room and assumed Eleanor was preparing for her departure. The sounds included footsteps, what seemed like furniture moving, and the opening and closing of doors that suggested she was gathering her belongings and getting ready to leave for her appointment. At 9 o'clock, I heard the front door close and saw Eleanor's car backing out of our driveway through the kitchen window. She appeared to be on schedule for her medical appointment, and I felt satisfied that our evening together had improved our relationship and established a foundation for better communication leading up to the wedding. The morning continued with routine wedding planning activities, including confirming the delivery schedule for flowers, reviewing the final menu selections with our caterer, and coordinating with the venue manager about setup requirements for the ceremony and reception. These conversations were productive and reassuring, confirming that all the major elements of our wedding were on track for successful execution. Around 11 o'clock, I received a text message from my sister Jessica, who was flying in from Chicago the following week to serve as my maid of honor and help with final wedding preparations. Jessica was 31 years old and had built an impressive career as a family law attorney specializing in high-conflict divorce cases and domestic relations litigation. Her legal expertise had proven valuable throughout my life, from reviewing rental agreements to providing advice about employment contracts and consumer protection issues. Jessica's text message asked about the timeline for the rehearsal dinner and whether I needed any help with last-minute coordination or vendor management. Her organizational skills rivaled my own, and she had been instrumental in helping me navigate some of the more complex aspects of wedding planning, including contract negotiations and vendor relationship management. I responded to Jessica's message with an update about Eleanor's apparent change in attitude and my hope that family tensions would be resolved before the wedding. Jessica had met Eleanor several times during holiday gatherings and family events, and she had expressed concern about Eleanor's controlling behavior and critical comments about my wedding choices. The conversation with Jessica continued for several minutes, covering details about her travel arrangements, bridesmaid dress fitting, and responsibilities for coordinating with other members of the wedding party. Jessica's support and involvement had been crucial throughout the planning process, providing both practical assistance and emotional encouragement during the more stressful moments of preparation. As our text conversation concluded, Jessica mentioned that she was looking forward to seeing my grandmother's wedding dress and hearing about any final alterations or accessories that I had selected. She had been enthusiastic about my decision to wear the vintage gown and had offered to help with any last-minute adjustments or styling details that might be needed.
A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The reminder about my dress prompted me to check on its condition and confirm that everything was ready for the final preservation cleaning scheduled for later in the week. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet where the garment bag had been hanging safely for the past several weeks. The garment bag was gone. I stared at the empty space in my closet for several seconds, trying to process what I was seeing. The special hanger I had purchased specifically for the dress was still there, but the garment bag containing my grandmother's wedding dress had completely disappeared. My initial reaction was confusion rather than panic, assuming that I had moved the dress to a different location and forgotten about the change. I searched through every closet in the house, checking guest rooms, storage areas, and even the laundry room where I sometimes hung delicate items for air drying. The dress was nowhere to be found, and my confusion was beginning to transform into genuine concern about what might have happened to the most important element of my wedding day outfit. The search expanded to include other areas of the house where the dress might have been moved for safekeeping or organization purposes. I checked under beds, in storage boxes, and even in the garage where I kept wedding supplies and decorations. The systematic search revealed that my grandmother's dress had simply vanished without explanation or obvious cause. As the reality of the situation began to sink in, I started to consider possible explanations for the dress's disappearance. The most logical possibility was that Eleanor had moved it for some reason, perhaps thinking she was being helpful by relocating it to what she considered a better storage location. Given her tendency to reorganize things according to her own preferences, this explanation seemed plausible and relatively innocent. I called Eleanor's cell phone to ask about the dress, but the call went directly to voicemail, which was not unusual given that she was probably in medical appointments that required her phone to be turned off. I left a brief message asking her to call me back when she had a chance, mentioning that I was looking for my wedding dress and wondering if she had seen it or moved it for any reason. The morning continued with increasing anxiety as I tried to focus on other wedding planning tasks while waiting for Eleanor's return call. The logical part of my mind insisted that there had to be a simple explanation and that the dress would be located quickly once I could speak with Eleanor about what had happened during the morning. However, a growing sense of unease was developing. As I considered Eleanor's pattern of critical comments about my dress choice and her strong opinions about what would be appropriate for the wedding. The timing of the dress's disappearance, occurring during the only night Eleanor had stayed in our house, seemed too coincidental to ignore completely. By noon, Eleanor had not returned my call, and my anxiety was beginning to affect my ability to concentrate on other responsibilities. I tried calling again, but the result was the same automated voicemail message that provided no information about when she might be available to respond to my inquiry about the missing dress. The afternoon brought a growing sense of dread as I continued searching for the dress while trying to maintain normal work responsibilities and wedding planning activities. The systematic search of our house had been completed multiple times, confirming that my grandmother's wedding dress was simply not present in any location where it should logically be found. Around 3 o'clock, I began considering the possibility that I would need to find an alternative dress for the wedding, a prospect that was both financially and emotionally devastating. The vintage gown represented not only significant sentimental value but also thousands of dollars in professional alterations and preservation work that would be lost if the dress could not be recovered. The practical implications of replacing the dress 3 weeks before the wedding were staggering. Finding a gown that would fit properly and be available for the wedding date would require immediate action and potentially substantial additional expense. More importantly, losing my grandmother's dress would mean breaking a family tradition that connected me to previous generations of women in my family. As the afternoon progressed without any communication from Eleanor, I began to consider other possible explanations for the dress's disappearance. The possibility of theft seemed unlikely given that nothing else appeared to be missing from the house, and the dress would have little value to anyone outside our family. The most troubling possibility was that Eleanor had deliberately taken or hidden the dress as a way of forcing me to purchase a new gown that met her standards for appropriate wedding attire. This explanation aligned with her previous criticism of my choice and her pattern of attempting to control various aspects of our wedding planning. By 4 o'clock, my concern had evolved into genuine alarm, and I decided to take more decisive action to locate the dress and understand what had happened during Eleanor's stay in our house. The search for answers would soon reveal that my concerns about Eleanor's involvement were not only justified but represented a level of vindictive behavior that exceeded my worst expectations about family conflict and wedding drama. The decision to check our security system came to me around 4:30, born from a combination of desperation and the sudden memory that David had installed comprehensive home security cameras 6 months earlier following a string of break-ins in our neighborhood. The system included both interior and exterior cameras that recorded continuously to cloud storage, providing 24-hour surveillance coverage of our property. David had been particularly thorough in positioning the cameras to cover all potential entry points and common areas, including several that monitored our backyard and the area around the detached garage where I stored wedding supplies. If someone had taken my dress from the house, there would be video evidence of their movements, both inside and outside our home. I accessed the security system through the mobile app on my phone, navigating to the cloud storage interface that David had shown me how to use for checking recordings when we were away from home. The system stored footage for 30 days before automatically deleting older files, providing more than enough time to review the previous evening and morning activities around our property. The first camera I checked was positioned in our main hallway, providing coverage of movement between bedrooms and common areas. The footage from the previous evening showed normal activity as David and I went about our usual routines, with Eleanor visible occasionally as she moved between the guest room and bathroom. Nothing in this footage appeared unusual or suspicious. The hallway camera also captured our morning routine, showing David leaving for work around 7:15 and my own movements as I prepared coffee and settled into my home office area. The timestamp indicated that Eleanor had remained in the guest room until approximately 8:45, consistent with her stated plan to leave for her medical appointment by 9 o'clock. However, the footage from 8:45 revealed activity that immediately raised alarm bells. Eleanor emerged from the guest room carrying what appeared to be a large white garment bag, moving quickly toward the back of the house in the direction of our rear door. The garment bag was clearly my grandmother's wedding dress, confirming that Eleanor had indeed taken it from my bedroom closet. My hands trembled as I watched Eleanor move through our house with my dress, her movements deliberate and purposeful rather than casual or helpful. She disappeared from the hallway camera's view as she headed toward the back door, but I knew that exterior cameras would capture whatever happened next in our backyard. The backyard camera footage provided crystal clear documentation of what Eleanor did with my grandmother's wedding dress, and the images were so shocking that I had to watch the sequence multiple times before accepting what I was seeing. Eleanor emerged from our house carrying the garment bag and walked directly to the fire pit area that David and I used for occasional evening gatherings with friends. At 8:52 a.m., Eleanor unzipped the garment bag and removed my grandmother's vintage wedding dress, holding it up briefly as if examining the intricate lace details and delicate silk fabric. The morning sunlight illuminated the dress beautifully, highlighting the craftsmanship and timeless elegance that had made it such a treasured family heirloom. What happened next was captured in horrifying detail by our high-definition security cameras. Eleanor placed the dress carefully in our fire pit, arranging it to ensure maximum exposure to flames. She then retrieved a container of lighter fluid from our outdoor storage cabinet and methodically doused the dress with accelerant, taking particular care to saturate the delicate lace appliques and seed pearl detailing. The moment Eleanor ignited the lighter and touched it to my grandmother's dress was seared into my memory forever. The vintage silk caught fire immediately, the flames spreading rapidly through the delicate fabric as Eleanor stood watching with what appeared to be satisfaction. She remained by the fire pit for several minutes, occasionally adjusting the burning fabric with a long barbecue tool to ensure complete destruction. The security footage showed Eleanor's face clearly throughout the burning process, and her expression was calm and determined rather than emotional or conflicted. This was not an impulsive act of anger, but a deliberately planned destruction of my most precious wedding possession. She watched my family heirloom burn completely, stirring the ashes to ensure that nothing recognizable remained of the dress that had connected 3 generations of women in my family. After the dress was completely consumed by flames, Eleanor used our garden hose to thoroughly extinguish the fire, dispersing the ashes and removing any obvious evidence of what she had burned. She then returned the lighter fluid to storage, cleaned the barbecue tool, and spent several minutes ensuring that the fire pit area appeared normal and undisturbed. The final footage showed Eleanor returning to the house, gathering her overnight bag, and leaving through the front door at exactly 9 o'clock, maintaining the facade of someone departing for a medical appointment. Her performance was flawless, showing no signs of guilt, remorse, or concern about what she had just done to destroy my wedding day. The security system had captured every moment of Eleanor's vindictive act in multiple angles and high-definition detail. The timestamps provided precise documentation of her movements, while the audio pickup had even recorded her humming contentedly as my grandmother's dress burned in our backyard fire pit. I sat in stunned silence for several minutes after watching the footage, trying to process the magnitude of Eleanor's betrayal and the calculated cruelty of her actions. This was not simply disagreement about wedding choices or controlling behavior from an overprotective mother-in-law. This was deliberate destruction of irreplaceable family property, committed by someone who had been welcomed into our home as a trusted guest. The emotional impact of witnessing Eleanor's actions was overwhelming and transformative. The woman who had shared dinner with us the previous evening, who had apologized for her previous criticism and expressed support for our wedding, had planned and executed the complete destruction of my most treasured possession while we slept peacefully upstairs. The security footage revealed that Eleanor's apparent change of heart during dinner had been a calculated performance designed to gain access to our home and create the opportunity to destroy my dress without suspicion. Her compliments about the dress, her apologies for previous criticism, and her expressions of support for our wedding had all been lies intended to lower my guard and facilitate her vindictive plan. The realization that Eleanor had spent the evening in our home, accepting our hospitality and participating in intimate family conversations, while planning to burn my grandmother's wedding dress was profoundly disturbing. The level of deception and manipulation required to maintain such a performance while harboring such destructive intentions revealed a side of Eleanor's personality that I had never suspected existed. I immediately saved copies of the security footage to multiple storage locations, understanding that this evidence would be crucial for any legal action and for confronting Eleanor about her actions. The video files were timestamped and provided irrefutable documentation of deliberate property destruction that had significant financial and emotional value. The practical implications of Eleanor's actions began to sink in as the initial shock subsided. My grandmother's wedding dress was completely destroyed 3 weeks before my wedding, leaving me without the centerpiece of my planned bridal ensemble. The dress had been altered specifically for my measurements and could not be replaced or replicated, representing not only financial loss but also the permanent destruction of a family tradition. The cost of the dress, while significant, was secondary to its irreplaceable sentimental value. The gown had been worn by my grandmother in 1953 and my mother in 1981, representing a tangible connection to previous generations and family history that could never be recovered. Eleanor had not simply destroyed a piece of clothing, but had deliberately severed a link to my family heritage. The timing of Eleanor's attack was particularly cruel, occurring just 3 weeks before my wedding when finding an alternative dress would be extremely difficult and expensive. The destruction appeared to be calculated to cause maximum disruption and emotional distress, forcing me to scramble for solutions during the most stressful period of wedding planning. My first instinct was to call David immediately and share the security footage, but I realized that his reaction might be compromised by his emotional relationship with his mother and his tendency to minimize family conflicts. Eleanor had manipulated David throughout his life, and she might be able to convince him that her actions were somehow justified or that the situation could be resolved through family discussion rather than legal action. Instead, I decided to call my sister Jessica, whose legal expertise and emotional distance from the situation would provide the objective analysis and strategic guidance I needed to respond appropriately to Eleanor's actions. Jessica had experience dealing with high-conflict family situations through her law practice, and she would understand both the legal implications and practical options for addressing Eleanor's destruction of my property. Jessica answered on the second ring, and I could hear the background noise of her Chicago law office where she was apparently working late on case preparation. Her initial greeting was cheerful and casual, but her tone changed immediately when she heard the distress in my voice and my explanation that I needed urgent legal advice about a family emergency. "What happened?" Jessica asked, her attorney. Instincts immediately activated by my obvious emotional state and the request for legal guidance. "Are you safe? Is David okay? What kind of emergency are we dealing with?" I provided Jessica with a detailed summary of Eleanor's overnight stay, the disappearance of my wedding dress, and the shocking security footage that documented Eleanor's deliberate destruction of our family heirloom. Jessica listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions about timing, evidence preservation, and the extent of property damage. "Send me the video files immediately," Jessica instructed after hearing my complete account. What Eleanor did constitutes multiple crimes, including breaking and entering, theft, arson, and destruction of property. The fact that she planned this attack and executed it while you trusted her as a guest in your home makes her actions particularly egregious from both legal and moral perspectives. Jessica's analysis of the situation was swift and comprehensive, drawing upon her experience with family law cases involving property destruction and domestic disputes. She explained that Eleanor's actions warranted both criminal prosecution and civil litigation, potentially resulting in significant financial penalties and even imprisonment depending on the monetary value of the destroyed property. "The vintage dress and professional alterations probably represent several $1,000s in direct damages," Jessica continued, "but the sentimental value and irreplaceable nature of the item could justify additional compensation for emotional distress and punitive damages. Eleanor's deliberate timing and calculated deception make this case particularly strong for maximum legal consequences." The conversation with Jessica provided immediate emotional relief and strategic direction for responding to Eleanor's attack. Having professional legal support from someone who understood both family dynamics and criminal law gave me confidence that Eleanor's actions would face appropriate consequences rather than being dismissed as family drama or wedding stress. Jessica advised me to preserve all evidence carefully, avoid confronting Eleanor directly until we had developed a comprehensive legal strategy, and document any additional damages or impacts resulting from the dress's destruction. She also suggested gathering estimates for replacement costs and professional statements about the dress's historical significance and value. "Don't tell David about this yet," Jessica warned. "Eleanor will try to manipulate the situation and convince him that her actions were somehow justified or that family harmony is more important than legal accountability. We need to have our strategy fully developed before she has the opportunity to spin the narrative or pressure David to minimize the consequences." The strategic advice about handling David was particularly valuable, as I had been torn between wanting his immediate support and recognizing that his emotional relationship with Eleanor might compromise his ability to respond appropriately. Jessica's experience with family conflict had taught her that preserving evidence and developing legal strategy should take priority over emotional confrontations that might allow perpetrators to escape consequences. As our conversation concluded, Jessica assured me that she would review the video evidence immediately and begin researching California statutes related to property destruction and domestic crimes. She also offered to coordinate with local attorneys if specialized expertise in California law would be beneficial for maximizing the legal response to Eleanor's actions. "Eleanor made a serious mistake by underestimating you and assuming that she could destroy your property without consequences," Jessica concluded. "The security footage provides irrefutable evidence of her crimes, and we're going to ensure that she faces full legal accountability for what she did to our family's heritage. After ending the call with Jessica, I spent the remainder of the afternoon documenting additional details about the destroyed dress, including photographs from previous fittings, receipts for alteration work, and family stories about its significance to previous generations. This documentation would support both the financial and emotional damages claims that would be central to any legal action against Eleanor. The process of cataloging what had been lost helped me understand the full magnitude of Eleanor's attack on my family and wedding plans. She had not simply destroyed a dress, but had deliberately targeted the most meaningful and irreplaceable element of my wedding ensemble, calculating that the timing would cause maximum emotional distress and practical disruption. The evening brought the difficult task of maintaining normal routine while processing the shocking discovery of Eleanor's betrayal and beginning to plan an appropriate response. David would return from work expecting normal dinner conversation about wedding planning and family relationships, unaware that his mother had committed serious crimes against our family while staying in our home as a trusted guest. The challenge of maintaining normal behavior while harboring knowledge of Eleanor's actions provided the first glimpse of the psychological strength that would be required to navigate the legal and family complications that lay ahead. The woman who had awakened that morning focused on routine wedding planning had been transformed by Eleanor's betrayal into someone who understood that family relationships could mask destructive intentions and that justice sometimes required strategic thinking rather than emotional confrontation. The security footage had provided irrefutable evidence of Eleanor's crimes, but converting that evidence into appropriate legal consequences would require careful planning and professional expertise. Jessica's involvement ensured that Eleanor's assumption about escaping accountability for her actions would prove as misguided as her belief that she could destroy my family's heritage without facing serious consequences. The investigation that would expose the full scope of Eleanor's manipulation began the following morning when Jessica called at 7 a.m., having spent most of the night reviewing California criminal statutes and consulting with colleagues who specialized in property crimes and domestic disputes. Her voice carried the focused intensity of an attorney who had identified multiple legal violations and was prepared to pursue comprehensive prosecution. "I've reviewed the security footage and researched the applicable laws," Jessica announced. Without preamble, Eleanor's actions constitute at least 6 separate criminal charges, including first-degree arson, grand theft, burglary, criminal trespass, destruction of property, and potentially hate crime enhancements if we can establish that she targeted the dress specifically because of its cultural or familial significance. Jessica's legal analysis revealed that the systematic nature of Eleanor's actions elevated them beyond simple property destruction into serious felony territory. The premeditation involved in planning the overnight stay, the deception used to gain access to our home, and the calculated timing of the destruction demonstrated criminal intent that warranted maximum legal consequences. The monetary value of a vintage 1950s wedding dress with professional alterations could easily exceed $5,000, which triggers grand theft charges in California, Jessica continued. Combined with the arson charge for deliberately setting fire to property, Eleanor is looking at potential prison time rather than simple fines or probation. The conversation with Jessica established our immediate priorities for building an ironclad legal case against Eleanor. These included obtaining professional appraisals of the destroyed dress, documenting all related financial losses, gathering witness statements about Eleanor's previous hostile behavior, and researching her background for any patterns of similar conduct that might support enhanced charges. Jessica had already contacted a private investigator in Los Angeles who specialized in family law cases and domestic disputes. Thomas Chen was a former LAPD detective with extensive experience investigating property crimes and gathering evidence for high-stakes litigation. His involvement would ensure that our investigation met professional standards that would withstand scrutiny in both criminal and civil proceedings. Chen will arrive this afternoon to examine the crime scene and begin background research on Eleanor, Jessica explained. He'll also coordinate with local law enforcement to ensure that criminal charges are filed properly and that the district attorney's office has all the evidence needed for successful prosecution. The coordination with professional investigators represented a significant escalation in our response to Eleanor's actions, transforming what might have been dismissed as family drama into a serious criminal investigation with potential imprisonment consequences. Jessica's legal expertise had identified the full range of charges that Eleanor's actions warranted, while Chen's investigative experience would ensure that evidence was gathered and preserved according to legal standards. After concluding the call with Jessica, I began the systematic documentation of everything related to my grandmother's wedding dress and Eleanor's access to our home. This process revealed details that I had not previously considered significant but which now appeared to be part of Eleanor's deliberate planning for her attack on my wedding. The first disturbing discovery came from reviewing text messages and phone calls between Eleanor and myself over the past month. Careful analysis revealed a pattern of seemingly innocent questions about my wedding dress that were actually intelligence-gathering operations designed to understand my schedule, the dress's location, and opportunities for access. 3 weeks earlier, Eleanor had asked detailed questions about when the dress would be picked up for final cleaning and preservation, information that would have helped her determine the optimal timing for her destruction plan. 2 weeks before that, she had inquired about whether I stored the dress at home or at a bridal shop, a seemingly casual curiosity that now appeared to be a reconnaissance for her criminal planning. Most significantly, Eleanor had specifically requested to stay overnight at our house rather than accepting David's offer to drive her to her medical appointment. Her insistence on spending the night, combined with her false story about early morning scheduling, suggested that gaining access to our home had been her primary objective rather than transportation convenience. The review of our home's entry logs from the security system revealed additional suspicious activity that I had not noticed during my initial examination of the footage. Eleanor had not simply awakened and immediately burned my dress, but had spent considerable time during the early morning hours moving through our house and examining various rooms. The timestamps showed Eleanor leaving the guest room at 6:30 a.m., more than 2 hours before she claimed to be departing for her appointment. Security cameras captured her searching through my bedroom, examining the closet where my dress was stored, and spending significant time in my home office where I kept wedding planning documents and vendor contracts. Eleanor's examination of my wedding planning materials suggested that her criminal intentions might extend beyond simply destroying my dress. She had photographed several documents with her phone, including vendor contracts, venue agreements, and financial information related to our wedding expenses. This systematic documentation of our wedding plans indicated possible additional sabotage attempts that had not yet been discovered. The security footage also revealed that Eleanor had accessed our home computer, logging into our shared email account where wedding-related communications were stored. The timestamp showed her spending nearly 30 minutes reviewing correspondence with vendors, venues, and service providers, suggesting that she was gathering information that could be used for future interference with our wedding plans. Thomas Chen arrived at our house at 2 p.m., bringing sophisticated evidence collection equipment and forensic expertise that would document Eleanor's crimes according to professional law enforcement standards. His initial examination of the fire pit area revealed physical evidence that had survived Eleanor's attempts to destroy proof of her actions. Fabric residue and metallic traces from the dress's embellishments are still present in the ash, Chen explained as he carefully collected samples for laboratory analysis. The accelerant residue will provide chemical evidence of deliberate arson, while the fabric samples can be compared to photographs of the original dress to establish the specific item that was destroyed. Chen's forensic examination extended beyond the immediate crime scene to include fingerprint analysis of the lighter fluid container, soil samples from areas where Eleanor had walked, and photographic documentation of the fire pit's condition before and after her actions. The scientific approach to evidence collection would provide irrefutable proof of Eleanor's criminal activities that could not be disputed or minimized in legal proceedings. The investigators' background research on Eleanor revealed disturbing patterns of controlling behavior and previous conflicts with family members that had not been disclosed to David or me. Chen had discovered court records showing that Eleanor had been involved in 3 separate legal disputes over the past 10 years, each involving family relationships and property disagreements. Eleanor was sued by her late husband's sister for destroying family heirlooms during estate settlement proceedings, Chen reported. She was also involved in a restraining order case with neighbors who accused her of harassment and property damage. There's a clear pattern of using property destruction as a weapon in personal conflicts. The discovery of Eleanor's history of similar behavior provided crucial context for understanding her attack on my wedding dress. This was not an isolated incident triggered by wedding stress, but rather a continuation of established patterns of vindictive behavior that Eleanor had used to punish people who opposed her wishes or challenged her control. Most significantly, Chen's investigation revealed that Eleanor had been terminated from her position as a high school principal following accusations of harassment and inappropriate conduct toward students and faculty members. The termination had been negotiated quietly to avoid public scandal, but internal school district documents detailed complaints about Eleanor's controlling behavior and vindictive responses to anyone who questioned her authority. Eleanor has a documented history of escalating conflicts and using psychological manipulation to punish people who don't submit to her control, Chen explained. Her attack on your wedding dress fits perfectly with her established patterns of targeting emotionally significant possessions to inflict maximum psychological damage. The background investigation had also uncovered financial information that raised questions about Eleanor's motivations for targeting our wedding. Property records showed that Eleanor's house was heavily mortgaged and that she had significant credit card debt, suggesting financial stress that might have contributed to her hostility toward our wedding expenses. More disturbing was the discovery that Eleanor had been researching David's inheritance rights and our property ownership through online legal databases. Her computer search history revealed inquiries about spousal property rights, inheritance laws, and procedures for contesting wills, indicating that her concerns about our marriage might extend beyond simple control issues into financial territory. Eleanor appears to view your marriage as a threat to her financial security and her control over David, Chen concluded. Her destruction of your dress was likely intended to disrupt the wedding and potentially cause enough conflict to end your relationship, preserving her influence over David and his financial resources. The investigation had revealed that Eleanor's attack on my wedding dress was part of a broader campaign of interference designed to sabotage our marriage before it could be legally established. Her systematic gathering of information about our wedding plans, financial arrangements, and vendor relationships suggested additional sabotage attempts that would likely occur as our wedding date approached. Chen recommended implementing enhanced security measures around our wedding vendors and venues, including password protection for all vendor communications and specific instructions about verifying any changes or cancellations through direct contact with David or me. Eleanor's access to our wedding planning information created opportunities for her to impersonate us in communications with vendors, potentially causing cancellations or disruptions that could destroy our wedding day. The investigators' analysis also revealed the sophistication of Eleanor's planning for the dress destruction. Her request to stay overnight had been carefully timed to coincide with David's early morning work schedule, ensuring that she would have unsupervised access to our home during the optimal window for her criminal activities. Eleanor knew David's work schedule and deliberately chose a morning when he would be gone early, Chen explained. She also researched your work patterns to understand when you would be likely to discover the dress's absence. Every aspect of her plan was calculated to maximize damage while minimizing her risk of immediate detection. The investigation had documented a level of premeditation and malicious intent that exceeded typical family conflicts and entered territory typically associated with stalking and domestic terrorism. Eleanor's systematic planning, deceptive execution, and attempts to destroy evidence demonstrated criminal sophistication that warranted serious legal consequences. As the investigation continued into the evening, Chen presented his preliminary findings and recommendations for proceeding with criminal charges and civil litigation. The evidence package included forensic documentation of the crime scene, background research revealing Eleanor's history of similar behavior, and legal analysis supporting multiple felony charges that could result in substantial prison time. We have more than enough evidence for successful criminal prosecution, Chen concluded. Eleanor's assumption that family relationships would protect her from legal consequences was a serious miscalculation. The systematic nature of her planning and the deliberate targeting of irreplaceable family property will result in maximum penalties under California law. The investigation had transformed Eleanor from a difficult mother-in-law into a documented criminal whose actions warranted comprehensive legal response. The evidence gathered by professional investigators exceeded the standards required for conviction, while the background research revealed patterns of behavior that would support enhanced sentencing and prevention of future similar crimes. Jessica's coordination of the investigation had ensured that Eleanor's attack on my wedding dress would face appropriate legal consequences rather than being dismissed as family drama. The professional documentation and forensic evidence would provide irrefutable proof of Eleanor's crimes, while the background research would establish her history of using property destruction as a weapon in personal conflicts. The investigation phase had revealed the full scope of Eleanor's criminal planning while providing the foundation for comprehensive legal action that would ensure appropriate consequences for her actions. Eleanor's assumption that she could destroy my family's heritage without facing serious legal accountability was about to be proven as misguided as her belief that intimidation and manipulation could control our wedding plans. The evidence gathering was complete, and the strategic planning for Eleanor's prosecution would begin immediately. The woman who had calculated that burning my grandmother's wedding dress would disrupt our marriage was about to discover that underestimating my family's commitment to justice had been the most serious mistake of her criminal career. The strategic planning phase began at 6 a.m. the following morning with a conference call that would establish the comprehensive legal and tactical framework for ensuring Eleanor faced maximum consequences for her crimes. Jessica had coordinated a team of specialists whose combined expertise would address every aspect of Eleanor's prosecution while simultaneously protecting our wedding from additional sabotage attempts. The call included Jessica from her Chicago office, Thomas Chen from his Los Angeles investigation headquarters, and attorney Rebecca Martinez, a California criminal law specialist with an impressive track record of prosecuting arson and property destruction cases. Martinez had been specifically recommended by the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office for her expertise in cases involving family violence and domestic terrorism. Eleanor's actions meet the legal definition of domestic terrorism under California Penal Code, Martinez explained during her analysis of the evidence package. The deliberate use of fire to destroy property belonging to a family member, combined with the systematic planning and psychological manipulation involved, qualifies for enhanced sentencing under anti-terrorism statutes. The legal team's analysis revealed that Eleanor could face up to 15 years in state prison if convicted on all charges, with mandatory minimum sentences that would prevent plea bargaining down to minor penalties. The systematic nature of her planning, combined with her history of similar behavior, positioned her as a repeat offender whose actions warranted serious incarceration rather than probation or community service. Martinez had already initiated preliminary discussions with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office about expedited prosecution that would ensure Eleanor's arrest and arraignment before our wedding date. The timing was crucial not only for justice but also for preventing Eleanor from attempting additional sabotage during the final weeks of wedding preparation. "We'll coordinate with local law enforcement to execute arrest warrants next Tuesday," Martinez explained. The evidence package provides more than sufficient grounds for immediate arrest on multiple felony charges, while the forensic documentation will ensure successful prosecution regardless of Eleanor's attempts to claim family privilege or emotional justification. The strategic coordination between criminal prosecution and wedding protection required careful timing that would neutralize Eleanor's ability to cause additional damage while ensuring that legal proceedings did not disrupt our wedding celebration. Jessica had developed a comprehensive timeline that would sequence Eleanor's arrest, our wedding ceremony, and subsequent legal proceedings to achieve optimal outcomes for both justice and personal celebration. Thomas Chen presented his security analysis for protecting our wedding from potential interference by Eleanor's allies or supporters who might attempt sabotage on her behalf. His background investigation had revealed that Eleanor maintained relationships with several individuals who had been involved in previous conflicts, including family members who might feel obligated to support her regardless of the criminal nature of her actions. Eleanor's sister Margaret has a history of harassment and has been involved in previous family conflicts, Chen reported. Her brother Robert was arrested 5 years ago for property damage during a neighbor dispute. "We need to consider the possibility that Eleanor might recruit family members to continue her campaign against your wedding." The security plan developed by Chen included comprehensive vendor verification protocols, enhanced communication security, and discrete surveillance measures that would protect our wedding venues and service providers from interference attempts. The plan also included legal notifications to Eleanor's known associates, warning them that any interference with our wedding would result in immediate criminal prosecution. Chen had coordinated with venue security managers and wedding vendors to implement password-protected communication systems that would prevent unauthorized changes to our arrangements. Every vendor had been provided with specific instructions about verifying any modification requests through direct personal contact with David or me, along with legal documentation establishing that Eleanor was prohibited from making any decisions regarding our wedding. The most sophisticated element of Chen's security plan involved establishing a network of professional surveillance that would monitor Eleanor's activities and those of her potential accomplices during the final weeks before our wedding. This surveillance would provide early warning of any sabotage attempts while documenting additional criminal activities that could enhance prosecution charges. Jessica had also coordinated with Dr. Sarah Thompson, a forensic psychologist who specialized in analyzing patterns of domestic violence and family manipulation. Dr. Thompson's involvement would provide expert testimony about Eleanor's psychological profile and the likelihood of continued criminal behavior if she was not incarcerated. Eleanor displays classic characteristics of narcissistic personality disorder combined with antisocial tendencies that make her extremely dangerous to family members who challenge her control, Dr. Thompson explained during her preliminary assessment. Her escalation from verbal harassment to property destruction indicates a pattern that will likely continue and intensify unless legal intervention prevents further contact with her victims. The psychological analysis provided crucial context for understanding Eleanor's motivations and predicting her future behavior. Dr. Thompson's expert testimony would support enhanced sentencing by establishing that Eleanor posed an ongoing threat to our safety and that standard probation or counseling would be inadequate to prevent future criminal acts. The strategic planning also addressed the delicate challenge of informing David about his mother's criminal activities without allowing his emotional attachment to compromise our legal strategy. Jessica had developed a comprehensive approach for presenting the evidence in a way that would help David understand the severity of Eleanor's actions while preparing him for the legal proceedings that would follow. David needs to understand that Eleanor's actions constitute serious crimes that warrant prosecution regardless of family relationships, Jessica explained. We'll present the evidence systematically, starting with the security footage and building to the broader pattern of criminal behavior that our investigation has revealed. The timing for revealing Eleanor's crimes to David had been carefully calculated to occur after our legal strategy was fully developed but before Eleanor's arrest, ensuring that David would have time to process the information while preventing him from inadvertently alerting Eleanor to our investigation. Jessica would be present for this conversation to provide legal context and answer questions about the prosecution process. Chen had also coordinated with wedding security specialists who would provide discreet protection during our ceremony and reception. The security team included former law enforcement officers with experience in threat assessment and crowd management, ensuring that our celebration would proceed safely even if Eleanor attempted to disrupt the proceedings after learning about the criminal charges. The comprehensive security plan included communication monitoring that would provide early warning if Eleanor or her associates attempted to contact wedding vendors, venue managers, or members of our wedding party. Any such contact would be immediately reported to law enforcement and could result in additional criminal charges for harassment and intimidation. Meanwhile, the practical aspects of replacing my destroyed wedding dress had been addressed through coordination with several high-end bridal boutiques that specialized in custom alterations and rush orders. Jessica had contacted her network of professional colleagues to identify bridal designers who could create a replacement gown that would honor my family's tradition while meeting the timeline constraints of our approaching wedding. The boutique consultation had been scheduled for the following day, with appointments at 3 different establishments that had confirmed their ability to create custom gowns within our 3-week timeline. The cost of rush orders and premium alterations would be documented as part of Eleanor's restitution requirements, ensuring that she would bear full financial responsibility for the consequences of her criminal actions. More significantly, the investigation had revealed possibilities for recovering elements of my grandmother's wedding dress that might have survived Eleanor's destruction attempt. Chen had coordinated with a textile restoration specialist who worked with law enforcement agencies to recover evidence from fire scenes and other disasters. Metallic elements like seed pearls and wire framework from lace appliques can sometimes survive fire damage, the restoration specialist explained. If we can recover even small elements from the original dress, they could be incorporated into a replacement gown to maintain the family connection that Eleanor tried to destroy. The possibility of recovering elements from my grandmother's dress provided emotional significance that extended beyond the practical aspects of wedding preparation. Eleanor's attempt to completely sever my connection to family tradition might be partially defeated by scientific expertise and careful evidence recovery. Jessica had also initiated civil litigation proceedings that would seek comprehensive damages for emotional distress, property destruction, and interference with contractual relationships. The civil case would proceed independently of criminal prosecution, providing additional financial consequences for Eleanor's actions while establishing legal precedents that would protect other families from similar attacks. The civil case will seek punitive damages that could total $50,000 or more, Jessica explained. Eleanor's deliberate targeting of irreplaceable family property, combined with her systematic planning and deceptive execution, justifies maximum financial penalties under California tort law. The civil litigation would also include injunctive relief that would legally prohibit Eleanor from any contact with David, me, or our future children, providing long-term protection from her manipulative and criminal behavior. The injunction would be enforceable through contempt of court proceedings that could result in immediate imprisonment for any violations. The coordination between criminal prosecution and civil litigation created a comprehensive legal response that would address every aspect of Eleanor's criminal behavior while providing maximum protection for our family's future security. Eleanor's assumption that family relationships would shield her from serious consequences was being systematically dismantled by professional legal expertise that exceeded her ability to manipulate or control. The strategic planning had also addressed potential media attention that might result from Eleanor's prosecution, given her previous position as a school principal and the unusual nature of her crimes. Chen had coordinated with public relations specialists who could manage media inquiries in ways that would protect our privacy while ensuring accurate reporting of Eleanor's criminal actions. The story of a mother-in-law burning a wedding dress will attract significant media attention, the PR specialist warned. We need to control the narrative to ensure that Eleanor is portrayed as a criminal rather than a sympathetic family member caught up in a wedding drama. The media strategy would emphasize the systematic nature of Eleanor's planning, her history of similar criminal behavior, and the serious legal consequences she would face for her actions. The goal was to establish public understanding that Eleanor's prosecution was appropriate justice rather than family overreaction to personal conflicts. As the strategic planning session concluded, the comprehensive framework for Eleanor's prosecution and our wedding protection was complete. Every aspect of the response had been coordinated by professionals with expertise in criminal law, investigation, security, and family dynamics, ensuring that Eleanor's attack on our family would result in appropriate consequences while protecting our wedding celebration. The alliance of legal and security professionals that Jessica had assembled represented resources and expertise that far exceeded Eleanor's ability to manipulate or control. Her assumption that burning my grandmother's wedding dress would disrupt our marriage had instead triggered a comprehensive legal response that would ensure her criminal behavior faced maximum consequences under California law. The strategic planning phase had transformed Eleanor from a difficult family member into a documented criminal whose prosecution would protect not only our family but also future potential victims of her manipulative and destructive behavior. The professional expertise that had been assembled to address her crimes would ensure that justice was served with precision and completeness that would exceed her worst expectations about the consequences of underestimating our family's commitment to accountability. The surveillance operation that would capture Eleanor's additional criminal activities began at dawn on Friday morning, exactly 1 week after she had burned my grandmother's wedding dress in our backyard. Thomas Chen had positioned his team of professional investigators at strategic locations around Eleanor's Victorian house, equipped with high-resolution cameras and audio recording equipment that would document any evidence of ongoing criminal planning or contact with potential accomplices. The surveillance team included former FBI agent Lisa Rodriguez, whose expertise in domestic terrorism cases made her particularly qualified to identify patterns of behavior that might indicate additional attacks on our wedding or family. Rodriguez had spent 15 years investigating family-based violence and understood the escalation patterns that characterized individuals like Eleanor who used property destruction as psychological warfare. Eleanor's comfort level with committing arson suggests she's likely planning additional sabotage attempts, Rodriguez explained during the morning briefing. Subjects who successfully execute one major crime often experience a psychological high that drives them to attempt increasingly sophisticated attacks. We need to document any planning activities that might reveal her next targets. The first day of surveillance revealed Eleanor's movements and communications in the aftermath of destroying my dress, providing crucial insights into her psychological state and potential plans for continued interference. The audio equipment captured phone conversations that confirmed Eleanor believed her crime had gone undetected and that she was actively planning additional sabotage for our wedding day. Eleanor's first phone call at 8:30 a.m. was to her sister Margaret, who lived in Phoenix and had been involved in previous family conflicts according to Chen's background investigation. The conversation was recorded in its entirety and revealed the disturbing extent of Eleanor's criminal planning and her complete lack of remorse for destroying my family heirloom. The little princess won't be wearing her precious grandmother's dress now, Eleanor told Margaret with obvious satisfaction. I made sure that family tradition ends with her. David deserves better than someone who thinks old rags are more important than proper wedding attire. Eleanor's description of my grandmother's vintage gown as old rags revealed the depth of her hostility toward my family's heritage and her complete inability to understand the sentimental value of family heirlooms. More significantly, her use of the term little princess demonstrated the contempt and resentment that had motivated her criminal behavior. Margaret's response to Eleanor's confession was equally disturbing, revealing that Eleanor had discussed her plans in advance and had received encouragement for her destructive actions. I'm proud of you for standing up to her, Margaret replied. Someone needed to put that girl in her place before she completely took over David's life. The conversation continued for 25 minutes and included detailed discussion of additional sabotage plans that Eleanor was considering for our wedding day. She had researched our venue's policies and was planning to contact vendors with false cancellation orders, hoping to disrupt our reception by eliminating catering, music, and floral arrangements at the last minute. Eleanor revealed that she had already contacted our wedding photographer, claiming to be me and requesting to change the photography package to eliminate formal family portraits. The photographer had apparently been suspicious of the request and had insisted on calling back to confirm, but Eleanor was planning to intercept those calls by temporarily forwarding our home phone to her cell phone. "I've been studying their wedding plans for weeks," Eleanor boasted to Margaret. "I know every vendor, every timeline, every detail. I can destroy their precious wedding without them even knowing it was me until it's too late to fix anything." The recorded conversation provided irrefutable evidence of Eleanor's ongoing criminal conspiracy and her systematic planning for additional sabotage attempts. Her detailed knowledge of our wedding arrangements confirmed that her search through our home computer and wedding documents had been part of a comprehensive intelligence gathering operation designed to identify multiple targets for destruction. Margaret's encouragement and support for Eleanor's criminal activities established her as a potential co-conspirator who might be willing to travel to California to assist with wedding day sabotage. The surveillance team immediately expanded their monitoring to include Margaret's phone communications and travel arrangements, ensuring that any attempt to coordinate additional crimes would be documented and prevented. The second significant phone call occurred at 2 p.m. when Eleanor contacted someone identified as Bobby in her phone contacts. Chen's investigation had revealed that Bobby was Eleanor's brother Robert, who had previous arrests for property damage and harassment. The conversation with Robert revealed even more disturbing plans for escalating Eleanor's campaign against our wedding. "I need you to come help me teach this girl a lesson," Eleanor told Robert. "She thinks she can waltz into our family and change everything about how David lives his life. Someone needs to show her that the Mitchell family doesn't tolerate disrespect." Robert's response indicated his willingness to participate in Eleanor's criminal activities, despite the potential legal consequences. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. "I owe you for helping me with my legal troubles last year. If this girl is causing problems for David, then she's causing problems for the whole family." Eleanor's conversation with Robert included specific plans for disrupting our wedding ceremony by creating disturbances that would force venue management to cancel or relocate the event. She had researched our venue's policies regarding security incidents and believed that creating the appearance of safety threats would trigger automatic cancellation procedures. "If I can get them to evacuate the venue for a security threat, the wedding will have to be postponed or moved to some terrible backup location," Eleanor explained to Robert. "The bride will be humiliated, David will realize she's more trouble than she's worth, and maybe he'll come to his senses about this whole marriage." The conversation revealed that Eleanor had studied our venue's emergency procedures and was planning to make false reports about security threats that would force evacuation during our ceremony. Robert agreed to assist by making anonymous phone calls to local police reporting suspicious activities at the venue, creating a pattern of reports that would justify law enforcement intervention. The surveillance team immediately alerted Chen and the legal team about Eleanor's plans for creating false security threats, which constituted additional felony charges including filing false police reports, conspiracy to commit fraud, and domestic terrorism. The recordings provided evidence of systematic planning that elevated Eleanor's criminal activities into federal jurisdiction territory. Chen coordinated with FBI domestic terrorism specialists who confirmed that Eleanor's plans to disrupt a wedding through false security threats met the federal definition of domestic terrorism under the USA Patriot Act. The federal charges would carry mandatory minimum sentences and would prevent any possibility of plea bargaining down to minor penalties. The third major development in the surveillance operation came when Eleanor was observed meeting with an unknown individual at a coffee shop near her home. The surveillance team captured detailed photographs of Eleanor's companion, who was later identified through facial recognition software as Vincent Torres, a private investigator with a history of conducting illegal surveillance and harassment campaigns for clients involved in family disputes. Torres had been investigated multiple times by state licensing authorities for unethical conduct and had been temporarily suspended from practicing as a private investigator following complaints about stalking and harassment of targets. His involvement with Eleanor suggested that her criminal planning was becoming increasingly sophisticated and potentially dangerous. The audio equipment captured Eleanor's conversation with Torres, revealing that she had hired him to conduct surveillance of David and me in preparation for additional sabotage attempts. Torres had been tasked with identifying our daily routines, work schedules, and social activities to create opportunities for harassment and intimidation that would disrupt our lives leading up to the wedding. "I want you to document everything they do, everywhere they go, everyone they talk to," Eleanor instructed Torres. "I need ammunition to prove that this girl is not suitable for my son. If we can create enough problems and embarrassment, David will realize he's making a mistake." Torres agreed to provide comprehensive surveillance reports and suggested additional services including background investigations of my family members and attempts to contact my employers with false complaints about my professional conduct. The scope of Eleanor's planned harassment campaign revealed a level of criminal sophistication that far exceeded simple family conflict. The surveillance operation also captured Eleanor's research activities as she spent hours online investigating methods for disrupting weddings and events. Her browser history, obtained through legal surveillance software, revealed searches for information about venue security procedures, vendor cancellation policies, and methods for creating public disturbances that would force event cancellations. Eleanor had researched specific techniques for sabotaging wedding receptions, including methods for contaminating food service, creating electrical problems that would disable sound systems, and triggering fire safety systems that would force venue evacuations. Her systematic research demonstrated criminal planning that posed serious safety risks to our wedding guests. The most disturbing discovery came when surveillance cameras captured Eleanor meeting with two unidentified individuals at a restaurant 40 miles from her home. The meeting appeared highly secretive, with Eleanor choosing a location far from her usual activities and taking precautions to avoid being followed or observed. Chen's team managed to capture audio recordings of the restaurant meeting, revealing that Eleanor had contacted individuals with criminal backgrounds who specialized in event disruption and harassment campaigns. The conversation included discussion of payment for services that would permanently solve her problems with my influence over David. I need this problem eliminated before the wedding, Eleanor told the unidentified individuals. Whatever it takes, however much it costs, I want this girl out of my son's life permanently. She has no idea who she's dealing with or what I'm capable of doing to protect my family. The individuals' responses suggested they were willing to provide services ranging from harassment and intimidation to more serious criminal activities that could pose direct physical threats to my safety. The recordings captured specific discussion of methods for creating accidents that would appear unrelated to Eleanor but would effectively eliminate her perceived threat to David's life. The surveillance evidence had escalated Eleanor's criminal activities from property destruction into territory involving potential violence and serious physical threats. Chen immediately coordinated with federal law enforcement agencies and the FBI Threat Assessment Unit to ensure that appropriate protective measures were implemented for David and me. The comprehensive surveillance operation had documented a criminal conspiracy that extended far beyond Eleanor's initial attack on my wedding dress into systematic planning for harassment, intimidation, and potentially violent interference with our wedding and marriage. The evidence gathered over 5 days of professional surveillance provided law enforcement with documentation of federal crimes that would ensure maximum prosecution and lengthy incarceration for all participants. Eleanor's assumption that her criminal activities would remain undetected had proven catastrophically wrong. Every conversation, every meeting, every research activity had been documented by professional investigators whose evidence would ensure that Eleanor's escalating criminal behavior faced comprehensive legal consequences that would protect not only our family but also any future potential victims of her vindictive manipulation. The surveillance phase had revealed the true scope of Eleanor's criminal enterprise while providing federal authorities with evidence of domestic terrorism planning that warranted immediate arrest and prosecution. Eleanor's campaign against our wedding had evolved from family conflict into a serious criminal conspiracy that would soon face the full force of federal law enforcement intervention. The coordinated law enforcement operation that would end Eleanor's criminal campaign began at 5 a.m. on Tuesday morning, exactly 10 days before our wedding, with simultaneous FBI raids at 3 locations across Southern California. Federal agents had spent the previous weekend finalizing arrest warrants and search warrants based on the surveillance evidence that documented Eleanor's escalation from property destruction to domestic terrorism planning. Special Agent Catherine Walsh, the FBI's lead investigator for domestic terrorism cases in the Los Angeles field office, had coordinated the multi-location operation with precision that would prevent any of the conspirators from destroying evidence or warning their accomplices about the impending arrests. The operation included Eleanor's Victorian house, her brother Robert's apartment in Riverside, and Vincent Torres's private investigation office in downtown Los Angeles. The raid at Eleanor's house was executed by a 12-agent team equipped with search warrants that authorized seizure of all electronic devices, financial records, and communications equipment that might contain evidence of her criminal conspiracy. The agents arrived in unmarked vehicles and surrounded Eleanor's property before announcing their presence, ensuring that she had no opportunity to destroy evidence or contact her accomplices. Eleanor's reaction to the FBI raid was captured on body-worn cameras that documented her complete shock and disbelief that her criminal activities had been discovered and investigated by federal authorities. Her initial response was denial and indignation, claiming that family disagreements were not matters for law enforcement intervention and demanding to speak with David about what she characterized as a misunderstanding. "This is ridiculous," Eleanor protested as agents executed the search warrant. "I'm David's mother, and if his fiancée has a problem with me, that's a family matter, not a criminal issue. You people have no business interfering in private family relationships." Agent Walsh's response to Eleanor's protests was direct and comprehensive, informing her of the specific federal charges she was facing and the evidence that supported each criminal count. The agent's presentation of the charges was methodical and thorough, ensuring that Eleanor understood the severity of her situation and the potential consequences of her criminal behavior. "Mrs. Mitchell, you are under arrest for domestic terrorism, conspiracy to commit arson, filing false police reports, criminal harassment, and conspiracy to commit assault," Agent Walsh announced. "We have recorded conversations, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence documenting your systematic planning to disrupt your son's wedding through criminal means." Eleanor's immediate demand to contact an attorney was granted, but the FBI had already coordinated with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office to ensure that no bail would be offered for the domestic terrorism charges. Eleanor would remain in federal custody throughout her prosecution, preventing any possibility of continued interference with our wedding or attempts to intimidate witnesses. The search of Eleanor's house revealed extensive additional evidence that confirmed and expanded the surveillance findings. Agents discovered detailed floor plans of our wedding venue that Eleanor had obtained through false pretenses, along with research materials about security systems, emergency procedures, and methods for creating public disturbances that would force venue evacuations. Eleanor's home computer contained comprehensive files documenting her criminal planning, including email communications with Vincent Torres about surveillance targets, financial records showing payments for illegal services, and internet search histories revealing research into methods for disrupting weddings and intimidating brides. The digital evidence provided irrefutable proof of Eleanor's systematic criminal conspiracy. Most significantly, the FBI search revealed a detailed timeline that Eleanor had created for implementing her various sabotage plans during the week leading up to our wedding. The timeline included specific dates for vendor impersonation calls, false police reports, and coordination with her accomplices for creating security threats at our venue. The timeline also revealed that Eleanor had planned to escalate her criminal activities on our actual wedding day, with plans for creating multiple simultaneous disruptions that would overwhelm venue security and force cancellation of our ceremony. Her planning included backup schemes in case any single sabotage attempt was detected or prevented by security measures. The simultaneous raid at Robert's apartment revealed his active participation in Eleanor's criminal conspiracy, including detailed maps of our wedding venue, equipment for making anonymous phone calls, and written instructions from Eleanor about timing and coordination for false security threat reports. Robert's arrest prevented the implementation of Eleanor's planned disruption of our wedding ceremony. Robert's reaction to his arrest was significantly different from Eleanor's denial and indignation. His criminal history had taught him to recognize serious legal consequences, and he immediately attempted to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for reduced charges. His willingness to provide testimony against Eleanor would strengthen the prosecution case while potentially reducing his own criminal penalties. "I didn't know she was planning anything violent," Robert claimed during his initial interrogation. "Eleanor told me she just wanted to disrupt the wedding to make the bride look bad. I thought we were just going to make some phone calls and create minor problems, not anything that would hurt people." The FBI agents conducting Robert's interrogation were experienced in evaluating cooperation offers from criminal defendants, and they recognized that Robert's knowledge of Eleanor's planning could provide valuable testimony for prosecution. However, his participation in conspiracy charges would still result in significant criminal penalties regardless of his cooperation level. The raid at Vincent Torres's private investigation office revealed the most disturbing evidence of Eleanor's criminal escalation. Torres had maintained detailed surveillance files on David and me, including photographs, schedule documentation, and personal information that had been gathered through illegal stalking and harassment activities. Torres's files contained evidence that Eleanor had requested increasingly invasive surveillance activities, including attempts to access our personal communications, financial records, and employment information. The scope of Torres's illegal surveillance activities constituted multiple felony charges that would result in the permanent revocation of his private investigator license and substantial prison time. Most alarming was Torres's documentation of Eleanor's requests for permanent solutions to her perceived problems with our marriage. His files contained research into methods for creating accidents that would appear unrelated to Eleanor while effectively eliminating her targets. The evidence confirmed that Eleanor's criminal planning had evolved into territory involving potential violence against David and me. Torres's cooperation with federal investigators revealed additional conspirators whom surveillance had not yet identified, including individuals with criminal backgrounds who specialized in harassment campaigns and intimidation services. The expansion of the federal investigation ensured that all participants in Eleanor's criminal network would face appropriate prosecution. The information provided by Torres led to additional arrests throughout Tuesday afternoon, as FBI agents executed warrants for other individuals who had provided services or support for Eleanor's criminal conspiracy. The comprehensive law enforcement response dismantled the entire network of accomplices and service providers that Eleanor had assembled for her campaign against our wedding. Meanwhile, the carefully planned revelation of Eleanor's crimes to David proceeded according to the strategy that Jessica had developed with input from Dr. Thompson, the forensic psychologist. David was contacted by Thomas Chen and asked to meet at a neutral location where the evidence could be presented in a controlled environment with appropriate emotional support available. David's reaction to learning about his mother's criminal activities was devastating and transformative, representing the complete destruction of his relationship with Eleanor and his understanding of her character. The presentation of evidence began with the security footage of Eleanor burning my grandmother's wedding dress and progressed through the systematic documentation of her escalating criminal behavior. "I can't believe my mother would do this," David said repeatedly as he reviewed the surveillance recordings and FBI evidence. "I knew she was difficult and controlling, but I never imagined she was capable of crimes like this. How could I have been so blind to what she was really like?" Dr. Thompson's presence during David's briefing provided immediate psychological support and professional perspective on the manipulation and emotional abuse that Eleanor had used to control David throughout his life. The psychologist's expertise helped David understand that Eleanor's criminal behavior represented the escalation of patterns that had been present throughout their relationship. "Your mother's criminal activities are the result of severe personality disorders that have likely influenced her behavior throughout your entire life," Dr. Thompson explained to David. "Her inability to accept your independence and her willingness to commit crimes to maintain control are characteristic of individuals with narcissistic and antisocial personality traits." David's processing of his mother's criminal behavior was complicated by years of emotional manipulation and conditioning that had taught him to minimize Eleanor's controlling tendencies and accept responsibility for her emotional reactions. Dr. Thompson's intervention helped David recognized that Eleanor's crimes were not his fault and that protecting our family from her criminal behavior was necessary and appropriate. The revelation of Eleanor's crimes to David also included discussion of the security measures that had been implemented to protect our wedding from additional sabotage attempts. David's complete support for the legal prosecution and security precautions confirmed his commitment to our marriage and his recognition that Eleanor's behavior warranted serious legal consequences. "I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law," David declared after reviewing all the evidence. "What she did to your grandmother's dress was unforgivable, but planning violence against us is something I never could have imagined. She's not the mother I thought I knew, and I can't have someone like that in our lives." David's emotional processing of Eleanor's betrayal was supported by individual counseling sessions with Dr. Thompson, who specialized in helping family members recover from manipulation and abuse by relatives with personality disorders. The therapeutic support ensured that David would be psychologically prepared for the legal proceedings and media attention that would accompany Eleanor's prosecution. The coordination between federal law enforcement, legal prosecution, and psychological support created a comprehensive response system that addressed every aspect of Eleanor's criminal campaign while protecting our family from additional harm. The precision and thoroughness of the intervention exceeded Eleanor's ability to manipulate or control the consequences of her criminal behavior. As Tuesday evening concluded, Eleanor and her primary accomplices were in federal custody facing charges that would result in decades of imprisonment, while the evidence gathered through surveillance and law enforcement raids provided irrefutable documentation of their criminal conspiracy. Eleanor's assumption that family relationships would protect her from legal accountability had been completely destroyed by professional law enforcement intervention. The systematic dismantling of Eleanor's criminal network had also revealed the full scope of her escalation from property destruction to planned violence, confirming that immediate legal intervention had been necessary to protect not only our wedding but also our physical safety. Eleanor's criminal planning had reached levels that posed serious threats to multiple victims, making her prosecution a matter of public safety as well as personal justice. The execution phase had achieved complete success in neutralizing Eleanor's ability to cause additional harm while gathering comprehensive evidence that would ensure maximum criminal penalties for all participants in her conspiracy. Eleanor's calculation that she could destroy our family's heritage and disrupt our marriage through criminal intimidation had instead resulted in her own destruction through federal prosecution that would permanently remove her from our lives and protect future potential victims from her vindictive manipulation. The swift resolution of Eleanor's federal prosecution exceeded even our legal team's expectations for comprehensive justice, as her criminal activities had generated such overwhelming evidence that plea negotiations became impossible and trial proceedings moved forward with unprecedented efficiency. Within 6 weeks of her arrest, Eleanor would face sentencing that would ensure she could never again threaten our family or any other potential victims of her vindictive manipulation. Federal prosecutors had assembled a case that included 43 separate criminal charges spanning domestic terrorism, arson conspiracy, stalking, harassment, filing false police reports, and conspiracy to commit assault. The systematic documentation provided by our surveillance operation, combined with the evidence seized during FBI raids, created a prosecution package that defense attorneys described as impossible to contest. Eleanor's attempts to secure legal representation had been complicated by her inability to post bail due to the domestic terrorism charges, while her demanding and manipulative behavior had resulted in 3 different attorneys withdrawing from her case within the first month. Her final attorney, a public defender with experience in high-profile criminal cases, had advised Eleanor that her only viable option was accepting a plea agreement that would still result in substantial prison time. The plea negotiations revealed the full scope of criminal penalties that Eleanor would face if her case proceeded to trial. Federal sentencing guidelines for domestic terrorism carried mandatory minimum terms of 15 years, while the conspiracy charges and pattern of escalating criminal behavior qualified her for enhanced sentencing that could extend her incarceration to 30 years or more. Eleanor Mitchell represents a clear and continuing danger to the community, federal prosecutor Amanda Richardson explained during the plea hearing. Her systematic planning, escalation from property destruction to planned violence, and complete lack of remorse demonstrate that lengthy incarceration is necessary to protect potential victims and deter similar criminal behavior. Eleanor's final plea agreement resulted in a sentence of 18 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 12 years. The sentence also included permanent restraining orders prohibiting any contact with David, me, or any future children we might have, along with supervised probation for 5 years following her eventual release that would monitor her compliance. With the no-contact provisions, the financial restitution component of Eleanor's sentence exceeded $75,000, covering not only the direct cost of replacing my grandmother's wedding dress but also compensation for emotional distress, security expenses, legal fees, and punitive damages designed to deter similar criminal behavior. Eleanor's Victorian house and other assets were seized to satisfy the restitution requirements, ensuring that she would bear full financial responsibility for the consequences of her crimes. Robert received a sentence of 4 years in federal prison after his cooperation with prosecutors helped convict 2 additional conspirators who had been planning to assist with wedding day sabotage. His willingness to testify against Eleanor and provide detailed information about their criminal planning had reduced his potential sentence from 8 years to 4, while still ensuring appropriate consequences for his participation in the conspiracy. Vincent Torres faced the most comprehensive destruction of his professional and personal life, receiving a 7-year federal sentence along with permanent revocation of his private investigator license and prohibition from any employment involving access to personal information or surveillance equipment. His cooperation with federal authorities had revealed the extent of Eleanor's criminal network while implicating several other individuals in related harassment and stalking schemes. The civil litigation that Jessica had initiated parallel to the criminal prosecution achieved even more substantial financial results, with a jury awarding damages totaling $125,000 for intentional infliction of emotional distress, destruction of irreplaceable property, and interference with contractual relationships. The civil judgment included punitive damages specifically designed to send a message about the serious consequences of targeting family heritage and wedding traditions through criminal means. Eleanor's deliberate targeting of irreplaceable family property represents a particularly egregious form of domestic terrorism, the civil court judge explained during the damages hearing. The jury's award reflects not only compensation for financial losses but also recognition that some forms of emotional and cultural damage cannot be adequately addressed through monetary compensation alone. The combination of criminal restitution and civil damages ensured that Eleanor would face financial consequences totaling over $200,000, effectively eliminating her personal wealth and ensuring that she would emerge from prison without resources to continue her pattern of manipulative and criminal behavior. Meanwhile, The extraordinary effort to salvage elements from my grandmother's destroyed wedding dress had achieved remarkable success through the expertise of Dr. Patricia Martinez, a textile forensics specialist who worked with law enforcement agencies to recover evidence from fire scenes and other disasters. Her analysis of the ash samples collected from our fire pit had identified metallic components and pearl fragments that had survived Eleanor's arson attempt. Fire damage to textiles often preserves small metallic elements like wire framework. From lace appliques and natural materials like seed pearls that have higher melting points than synthetic fabrics, Dr. Martinez explained as she presented the recovered materials. While the silk fabric was completely destroyed, we've recovered approximately 40% of the original seed pearls and several pieces of the wire framework that can be incorporated into a replacement gown. The recovered elements from my grandmother's dress were carefully cleaned and prepared for incorporation into a new wedding gown that would honor the family tradition while acknowledging the criminal destruction that had nearly severed that connection. The process of creating a new dress that included elements from the original represented both practical restoration and symbolic triumph over Eleanor's attempt to destroy my family's heritage. Jessica had coordinated with Madame Isabella Rousseau, a renowned bridal designer who specialized in creating custom gowns using vintage materials and historical techniques. Madame Rousseau's expertise in working with antique textiles and recovered materials made her uniquely qualified to create a dress that would incorporate the salvaged elements while meeting the timeline requirements for our wedding. Creating a gown that honors your family tradition while acknowledging the trauma you've experienced requires balancing historical authenticity with contemporary strength, Madame Rousseau explained during our design consultation. The recovered pearls and lace framework will be featured prominently, while the new silk will be chosen to complement the vintage elements and create a cohesive design that tells the story of both heritage and resilience. The design process for my new wedding dress became a collaborative effort involving my mother, Jessica, and even David, who contributed suggestions about elements that would honor his newfound understanding of family loyalty and protection. The final design incorporated the recovered seed pearls in a pattern that replicated my grandmother's original gown while adding contemporary elements that reflected my own personality and the strength I had developed through confronting Eleanor's criminal behavior. The completion of my new wedding dress represented more than simply replacing destroyed property. It symbolized the transformation of Eleanor's destructive attack into an opportunity for family bonding and creative collaboration that strengthened rather than weakened our heritage connections. Eleanor's attempt to sever my family traditions had instead resulted in deeper appreciation for those traditions and enhanced commitment to preserving them for future generations. Our wedding day arrived with security measures that were both comprehensive and discreet, ensuring that our celebration could proceed without the anxiety and tension that Eleanor's criminal campaign had been designed to create. The professional security team coordinated by Thomas Chin included former law enforcement officers who specialized in event protection, while federal authorities maintained monitoring systems that would provide immediate alert if any of Eleanor's associates attempted interference. The ceremony itself was transformed by the knowledge that we had overcome serious criminal threats to achieve our celebration. Every moment carried enhanced emotional significance because we understood how close Eleanor's criminal planning had come to destroying not only our wedding but potentially our physical safety and family relationships. David's emotional state during our wedding reflected his complete psychological separation from Eleanor's manipulation and his commitment to building our family relationship on foundations of honesty, mutual respect, and protection rather than the patterns of control and intimidation that had characterized his relationship with his mother. His wedding vows included specific promises about defending our family from any future threats and ensuring that our children would never experience the manipulation and emotional abuse that had dominated his own childhood. I promised to protect our family from anyone who would try to harm us, regardless of their relationship to me, David declared during our ceremony. I will never allow family loyalty to compromise my responsibility to keep you and our future children safe from people who use love as a weapon and tradition as a tool for control. My own wedding vows acknowledged the strength and capabilities I had discovered through confronting Eleanor's criminal behavior, while expressing commitment to maintaining the vigilance and strategic thinking that had enabled our family to achieve justice. The experience had revealed personal resources and professional capabilities that would influence every aspect of our future relationship and family planning. I promised to continue being the kind of person who fights for our family when we face challenges, I declared. I will never be passive when someone threatens what we've built together, and I will always remember that sometimes protecting the people you love requires courage, intelligence, and the willingness to seek help from professionals who can ensure that justice is served. The reception celebration included recognition of the professional team whose expertise had enabled us to achieve comprehensive justice while protecting our wedding from sabotage. Jessica's toast acknowledged the transformation that had occurred. Not only in our family but also in my understanding of my own capabilities and potential for strategic thinking and leadership. Eleanor believed that burning a wedding dress would destroy a bride's confidence and break apart a family, Jessica announced during her maid of honor speech. Instead, her criminal behavior revealed my sister's strength, intelligence, and ability to coordinate complex responses that achieved complete justice. Eleanor underestimated not only our family's commitment to each other but also our capacity for ensuring that criminals face appropriate consequences for their actions. The media attention surrounding Eleanor's prosecution had generated national coverage that emphasized the serious legal consequences for family members who commit crimes against relatives, while highlighting the importance of documentation and professional legal response to domestic violence and harassment. Our case had established legal precedents that would protect other families from similar criminal campaigns while demonstrating that family relationships do not provide immunity from criminal prosecution. The long-term impact of Eleanor's prosecution extended beyond our individual family to influence policy discussions about domestic terrorism, family violence, and the legal system's response to crimes that target cultural and heritage symbols. Legal scholars had written extensively about our case as an example of how systematic documentation and professional coordination could achieve comprehensive justice in complex family-based criminal cases. 6 months after our wedding, I had established a consulting practice that provided strategic guidance and coordination services for individuals and families facing complex legal challenges, harassment campaigns, and domestic violence situations. The expertise I had developed through necessity during Eleanor's criminal campaign had evolved into professional capabilities that could help other people navigate similar crises while ensuring appropriate legal consequences for perpetrators. The consulting practice included partnerships with law enforcement agencies, legal professionals, and private investigators who specialized in family-based crimes and domestic terrorism cases. The network of professional relationships that had been crucial for our own case now served as resources for helping other families achieve justice while protecting themselves from criminal interference and manipulation. David's career had also been enhanced by his experience with Eleanor's prosecution, as his understanding of project management and systematic planning had evolved to include security assessment and risk management capabilities that were valuable in his construction industry work. His personal transformation from someone who minimized family conflicts to someone who recognized and responded appropriately to serious threats had improved both his professional performance and personal relationships. Our first anniversary was celebrated with the knowledge that Eleanor remained in federal prison, serving her 18-year sentence without possibility of early release or contact with our family. The permanent restraining orders and ongoing federal monitoring ensured that she would never again be able to threaten our family or interfere with our personal relationships, while the financial restitution had eliminated her resources for funding future criminal activities. The security measures that had been implemented for our wedding had evolved into ongoing protection protocols that would continue throughout Eleanor's incarceration and potential future release. The professional security team maintained monitoring systems and threat assessment capabilities that would provide early warning if Eleanor or any of her associates attempted future interference with our family. Most significantly, the experience has taught us that responding to serious threats requires professional expertise, systematic documentation, and strategic coordination rather than emotional reactions or family loyalty that compromise safety and justice. Eleanor's criminal campaign had been defeated not through family discussion or emotional appeals, but through comprehensive legal action that recognized her behavior as serious crimes warranting maximum prosecution. The final resolution of Eleanor's case had transformed what began as a shocking personal betrayal into a comprehensive victory for justice, family protection, and the principle that criminal behavior must face appropriate legal consequences regardless of family relationships. Eleanor's assumption that burning my grandmother's wedding dress would destroy our wedding and family had instead resulted in her own permanent removal from our lives and the establishment of legal precedents that would protect other families from similar criminal attacks. Our new beginning was built on foundations of strength, professional competence, and commitment to justice that had been forged through the most challenging experience of our lives, ensuring that our family would never again be vulnerable to the kind of manipulation and criminal interference that Eleanor had attempted to impose through violence, deception, and vindictive destruction of irreplaceable family heritage. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.